Voice of San Diego podcasts are sponsored in part by the San Diego Tourism Authority. As a nonprofit news organization, Voice of San Diego depends on our members, foundations, and sponsors like the San Diego Tourism Authority to provide funding to support the investigative journalism you expect from Voice of San Diego. We are very grateful for all of our supporters and will recognize them during the show. San Diego is a city filled with diversity, creativity, discovery, and adventure, and nowhere is that spirit more evident than in Balboa Park, the region's cultural heart. The San Diego Tourism Authority is proud to partner with National Geographic on a 4-part miniseries that looks at what makes our city and Balboa Park so unique. The series airs on the National Geographic Channel at 7 p.m. November 1st and November 8th. Find out more at www.sandiego.org/Balboa Park. And if you like Voice of San Diego's work and want to become a sponsor too, contact us at development@voiceofsandiego.org.
Hey, welcome to those of you listening on News Radio 600 Kogo. My name is Scott Lewis. I'm here with my friend, of course, Andrew Keats.
What's up, buddy?
And Sarah Libby.
What's up?
Hello. And we are joined today for our traditional post-election panel discussion, roundtable of sorts. He is the CEO of Rise San Diego, which runs a series of fellowships and events and mentorship programs to develop leaders in the region, especially among underrepresented communities. He's also run for city council a couple times, and once against Myrtle Cole, who lost Tuesday. We're going to talk about that. He comes from deep roots in southeastern San Diego. Welcome, Dwayne Crenshaw.
Thank you. Welcome.
How are you?
Good. I'm great. Ready to do this.
Good. Let's do this. All right. And she is president of Golden State Consultants, a prolific fundraiser. You basically want her on your team if you're running for office for Republican candidates and conservative causes and nonprofits as well. She's on the board for Habitat for Humanity and is a regular guest on Fox News. Ashley Hayek, welcome.
Thank you. Hello.
Thanks for coming in.
My pleasure.
All right. So we have a lot to talk about. We're going to dive right in. But first, Election Day this week started in an awkward way. It was a little bit of a surprise. It was like 9 a.m. or so.
It was on my phone when I woke up.
It was during that period when there's no news, except there was news.
Yeah, exactly. Like usually there's no content, for 8 hours, so we're just all waiting.
You text a million people like, what are you hearing? You got any numbers? You got anything?
And there's always like the, wait, I couldn't vote, sort of things. And, but Darrell Issa decides to fill the vacuum of this no content period with some serious content. Some hot lava content. Here he was on Fox News. Darrell Issa, of course, the sitting congressman for the 49th Congressional District. He decided to retire, resign, not seek re-election.
And take a job as the registrar for that district only and declare very early.
I was like, what? I didn't hear that. Yeah. So here he is on Fox News talking about the people trying to replace him in the 49th Congressional District.
What is your sense about today? I mean, you're one of these districts that could really flip toward Hillary Clinton. There were 23 House districts Republicans are defending today where she won at the presidential level, but a Republican held on to the seat like you did in 49. What gives at the end of the night, do you think?
Well, to a certain extent, you have to write off some of California. My district was never in play this cycle. And so it was never funded. And quite frankly, we know the results already. And there will be a Democrat representing La Jolla and Solana Beach for the first time in a number of years.
We've barely begun voting.
Never in play.
Must have been news for the Harkey GOTV team.
Ashley, so you I think worked on that race, right?
Yes, a little bit.
And that must have shocked a few of your people around there in the Republican ranks.
Well, I don't think it's helpful for starters.
Yeah, I think so. It's right now at about 54-46, right? So it's not like it was impossible.
And Diane Harkey won Orange County.
Yeah.
She did, which is an area that Mike Levin comes from.
Right.
Right.
So I think the DC strategy initially was to have 2 Republicans in the runoff. That's the jungle primary system, right? And I think they wanted to have Rocky Chavez and Diane Harkey. And when they realized that that wasn't going to be the case, they decided to not fund that race and focus on incumbents. Kristen Gaspar wasn't polling competitively because she has not been in office for a lifetime, like both Diane and Rocky. So she was at a disadvantage. But looking at that seat, like I just said, Mike Levin, he's from Orange County, did not win any part of Orange County. He won the coastal part of San Diego. It's actually really disappointing that we will not have somebody representing San Diego in that seat.
Yes.
That's the most disheartening part.
Do you think in that there's all this talk about, well, Rocky Chavez could have competed a lot better? He made the point at PolitiFest for us. He's like, his theory was that that Issa actually picked Harkey because he wanted to prove that this seat couldn't win, and so he wanted to support the weakest candidate in a way.
Yeah, he said it was kind of an ego move, that if the district elected another Republican, then it would have meant it was just a referendum on Darrell Issa himself, as opposed to, a changing district who would have voted Democratic no matter what. What's your read on that?
Is that coming from his place of egotism, or is that coming from him wanting to play identity politics?
It certainly, is
it's like
a
galaxy
theory
brain.
that makes him look pretty good.
Right. I don't necessarily think that. I think it would be if we had a coastal Republican from San Diego, 75% of the district is in San Diego. We could definitely take that seat back. Darrell Issa said, I took that seat from a Democrat. I think we could take the seat from the Democrat again. Like you said, Mike Levin lost Orange County. So if we get somebody from our area to represent, I think that would be positive.
So you're emphasizing really the difference with San Diego and Orange County. And you felt like that really is a strong dynamic, that difference.
Yeah, I think that piece, and then also financially. So if you look at the numbers in that race, and this comes from my total dorky political finance perspective, there was nearly $19 million spent for Democrats in that seat.
Wow.
As opposed to Harkey's $1.7 million.
Wow.
So she was blown out of the water. Poor thing didn't even have, that's hard to face.
Did the Republicans really turn off the spigot as he implied, that they just gave up early?
I don't think Republicans gave up. I just think they reprioritized. There's 7 targeted congressional seats in California. There have been folks who have said that it's cheaper to play, and you can play in 10 seats outside of California as opposed to 1 seat in California. So I think they just had to prioritize, and that's kind of where it fell.
But do you think saying poor thing Diane Harkey didn't get any investment kind of takes her out of the equation, as if it wasn't about her? I mean, isn't it because people didn't consider her as strong of a candidate?
When you have people spending 20-1 against you, you're not going to have the resources to combat the negative, nasty smear campaign that Mike Levin ran against her.
It seems to me, though, if we're being really realistic, it's a pipe dream that the Republicans are coming back anytime soon or in our lifetime in that district. And Darrell Issa was one of the first Congress members to bail. He ran against a flawed candidate in 2016 and barely won. There was no one, Harkey, Chavez, Gaspar, who was going to keep that seat. The Democrat was going to win 20-1, 2-1. This is a pipe dream. It's changed.
The numbers are pretty close. She only lost by 5 points, by 5 to 7 points. I don't think it's a pipe dream. I think there's a clear opportunity for Republicans to play and get that seat back. And I think Mike Levin's progressive agenda and how he votes, he's going to be under a microscope. And I think you'll see some activity there in the future.
So I was actually listening to Matt Strabone's podcast, and he made the point that I hadn't thought of, but seems about right, that based on the campaign that Levin ran, he is now the most progressive member of the San Diego congressional delegation.
Really? More than Vargas? Or
more than Vargas, more than Peters.
I think that makes sense. Yeah.
I mean, he ran on Medicare for all.
If you think about the campaign that he ran, yeah.
And so, and it's not the most progressive district.
Right.
So does that make him an early target in 2020 if you can get the right candidate?
Yeah. Absolutely.
We've heard that Kristen Gaspar might already be thinking about trying again. She'll be in a couple more years. If she's going to be in a tough race, might as well be for Congress instead of county supervisor. And you mentioned her earlier. Do you think she's a strong candidate or prospect there?
I think she would be a great candidate.
Mm-hmm.
I would like for her to run. That's my personal opinion. I don't know if she's going to run, but I would absolutely love to see her in that seat.
Why is that?
I think she represents the district well, being the first mayor of Encinitas. I think she understands coastal issues. She's a prolific fundraiser. She identifies well with people. People use the fact that she has a young family against her, but I actually think that's actually better in Congress when looking at things like flex work time or paid maternity leave and things like that.
I asked her. I remember Carl DeMaio had said something like, "Well, it's not her turn, or it's she should wait." And I asked her about that at the green room of the NBC one day, and she just like looked at me and said, "Yeah, that's not something I think about." Thanks, Carl.
I don't think that's a good take for any candidate.
No, you never should say that, right?
Never.
All right, so I don't want to spend too much time on Congress, but we do have to talk, I think, a little bit about the 50th Congressional District. This is Duncan Hunter Jr.'s spot. Amar Campa-Najjar, the Democrat, tried to run. There literally could not have been more wrong with Duncan Hunter's campaign, his career so far. Everything has gone poorly. He's under indictment. He ran a campaign that was described as bigoted in many ways, and yet he seems to have prevailed. It's not completely certain, but it looks pretty good for him. Why do we think that was? Is it just the physics of the race, the demographics? There's no Democrat there, or that Democrat couldn't pull that out? What do you think, Ashley?
It's the most conservative district in California. It's 2-1 Republican, period.
Oh, wow. Even like above like Northern California or whatever.
Based upon what I looked at before I came here today, it said this district is the most conservative district in California, one of the most conservative districts, 2-1 Republican Democrat registration. I don't think his opponent was the best candidate. I don't think Democrats were preparing for that type of election. And I also think the conversation of, well, he's indicted. This was happening around the same time as Kavanaugh. And so there was this whole notion of like innocent until proven guilty. And the more they railed on that, I think it kind of fired up the Republicans to turn out for Duncan.
Do you think any of them were making a conscious choice of like, well, we just want to keep it in Republican hands,
sure,
so that we don't have to, no matter what happens, that if he resigns or something, we'll just do that, rather that than 2 years of a Democrat?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, there's always people who will vote the party line.
It seems to me that people made that choice. They're the Trumpsters, and they doubled down on the racism, clearly, and they were going to be there. And then there were the conservatives in the district who said exactly what you're saying. We'll take 2 years. There's going to be a special election, or not even 2 years. But we're not going to let the Democrats have it. And they made that calculation.
There was a poll a couple months ago now that had people weigh in directly on Duncan Hunter and on Amar Campa-Najjar. But then there was another question about, are you seeing this as a referendum on President Trump? And like some huge percentage, 80% or something, said yes. And so if you look at it from just that question, it wasn't even about Duncan Hunter, really. It was about whether this district supports Donald Trump. And they said like really resoundingly that they did. I also want to take issue with something you said, Scott. I don't think this was a campaign that people said was bigoted. I think it was bigoted. I think that's indisputable.
Yeah. Okay. Sometimes I can't shake those old journalism passive voice things. All right. Well, let's move on. So everything is up in the air for the future of the San Diego City Council, and the mayor's future. Although he wasn't on the ballot, one big loser from the night was San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer. He wanted Soccer City Measure E to pass. It lost by 40 points. He worked overtime to raise money. 40 points! 40 points. It was bad. I don't know if so it's 20 points under 50, but we can say 40 points, right? He worked overtime to raise money and block attacks against Council President Myrtle Cole, and she lost by 10 points and counting. He worked hard. Actually, it's like 12 now, right?
Wow.
He worked hard to save Councilwoman Lorie Zapf's campaign. She lost by 12 points and counting. The UT has already called him a lame duck, and immediately ducks everywhere lost 5 points in their approval polls. Sorry, I had to do a duck joke.
Good.
Thank you. So, look.
That was not good.
I like it.
It was good. It was really good.
Not even giving
Picture
that
a duck just chilling. It's a good one.
Who's paying for this hypothetical poll on ducks?
Is he a lame duck? That seems brutal. It's not. There's still 2 more years in his term. lame duck, of course, implies that there's no reason to consider him in the discussion of major issues, but he's still the mayor. He's still a strong mayor. Dwayne, what do you think? Does he have a role in this, in what happened, or was he just kind of a victim of this wave of anti-Trump enthusiasm or whatever?
Well, I certainly think the mayor was a victim of Trump and what was going on in the environment. There was going to be a wave election. Effectively, though, his power is diminished completely. There's a supermajority Democrats now on the council. But perhaps like with community choice aggregation, I could see him perhaps moving to some more of those issues around homelessness, affordable housing, where there may be some compromise with Democrats to build that legacy. As you mentioned, now he's got to double down on SDSU West and perhaps deliver there and make sure they can achieve some of the outcomes that they looked for.
Right.
That was my favorite part of the week, is when he endorsed SDSU West after it had won.
Yeah,
That was good.
a couple hours after. What do you think, Ashley? Am I being too hard on the mayor?
Well, I mean, first of all, looking at Soccer City, the mayor was not out there campaigning for Soccer City. You know, like he was not actively out there pushing for that whatsoever. It was not a priority for him. You know, in the past, the mayor has made it very clear his priority has been the convention center. So if you want to look at who the lame duck is, let's look at Barbara Bree and Chris Ward, who flipped their position on that, because convention center should have been on the ballot this year. And it was not, as a result of those two council members. I think it's also important to look at the fact that the mayor actually campaigned against Myrtle before. He supported Dwayne here.
That's true.
He wants to support people in the community. You know, he supported Lorie. That was his district. She's done a lot. I know you have a term for her, Zapf.
Just for that particular picture that was everywhere.
It's catching on.
It is the Zapf. Yeah.
To be clear, we're not calling Lorie a Zapf.
Okay.
That would be
Just the picture.
Yeah.
Just the vessel.
But, you know, she's been really involved with, you know, I Love Clean San Diego and those groups. And
Sure.
So I think, you know, the mayor did see an opportunity. But if you want to look at what's not getting done in the city, look to the 5 council majority that's run by labor. I wish the media would look at the labor unions who are yanking their leashes when it comes to short-term rentals, Chris Ward, or convention center, before calling the mayor a lame duck.
That's fair. I mean, they could have been doing things with the majority, and in large part, they were being led by Myrtle Cole, who now is out.
And perhaps except for the convention center, Myrtle Cole was very malleable and workable with the mayor. That was easy. That's how she got elected.
Well,
with Republican support.
Yeah. So we'll get to labor. They had a bad night too, I think. But first, these last 2 years of the mayor, you make a good point, Dwayne. Like, they had kind of fallen into this world where they needed a 5th vote, and they could pretty often get it from Myrtle, and that had maybe become something of a crutch. Now they are still going to want to do things for the next 2 years. They'll have to potentially get more creative about how they do it. What I wonder is, like, what are those things going to be? What are they like? What are the agenda items besides the convention center, which we expect to have a special election early next year for? Like, how else does he occupy the last 2 years of office? And he's going to have to work with more Democrats now. So does that mean he has to move to the left, or can he still figure out things to get done that don't necessarily fit on the left-right ideological spectrum?
Well, I think it's definitely going to be more on the left in those issues such as homelessness and affordable housing, where there may be differences on how far we go, but there's a lot of commonality around that. I actually don't think there's going to be a special election for the convention center. I think the Democrats are going to buck them on that. There will be one in 2020, but I don't see that happening as an April special election. But issues like homelessness, maybe some infrastructure issues will be there around transit, transit-oriented development. I think those will be some areas we can find some common ground, but not a lot.
So Ashley, what do you think? Is there?
Well, you know, that's really unfortunate to say, because a big piece of the convention center is actually homelessness, right? And the funding for homelessness. And so if those council members don't want to come to the table on that, I think that shows where they stand on that important issue. The other thing, next week, the council is voting on the navigation center. And I'm looking to see where Barbara Bree and Chris Ward, they're the ones who have been holding it up. Ask businesses in North Park and Hillcrest what they are experiencing right now with the homeless crisis. It's unbelievable. My office is downtown in front of the trolley track area. It is unsafe to walk. Like, we have like rules, like you don't go when it's late. Literally by 4:30, the homeless population is sleeping in front of our offices. If these council members are not willing to take that on, it's going to be detrimental for them in 2020.
Mm-hmm. And you're not buying the argument that there should be a broader plan in place for something like the navigation center. I mean, it's, it itself won't house anybody. Do we need a building for that?
I think that this is a step in the right direction. And I would like to see one of these plans that the other side keeps talking about, because they have a criticism for every aspect of the homeless plan, every aspect of the convention center, but there have been no solutions brought forth.
So just to clarify before, so you hit Ward for not supporting the special election, and he would say, well, I was in the Cook Islands. And I couldn't register my vote from the Cook Islands. So I think that what we're all watching for right now is whether the mayor does push for a vote before the new council is seated in order to get one of these special elections set for the springtime. And we're all waiting to see if that happens or not. And so then there's the question of whether he could get the votes from the current council, or whether he could get the votes from the new one. But let me step back though and ask, Ashley, if you were in the mayor's, close circle of advisors, I'm not saying you're not, maybe you are, but what would you tell him about sort of a road to legacy and redemption as far as leadership? It does feel like he is on his heels right now on a lot of these issues.
That's an interesting question. Again, I think if I were in his office, I would prioritize convention center. I think that, continuing to, he's done a great job of trying to work with Myrtle, or work on climate action plan, or work on different important issues that are, it defies the stereotype for Republicans to work on environmental issues, right? And I think that's something he's been willing to do, especially coming from the Mission Bay Park Committee. And that will be something he continues to do. He's going to be an advocate of making economically sound decisions. And I would hope that he would hold others to that accountability level.
Okay.
And I think similarly, again, community choice aggregation is definitely a good example of the shift that's being made and supporting that issue, which is why I think around issues around bicycles and those issues we're having there with the scooters, there may be some public transit, that there'll be some movement and some agreement that can be found there as well. I think on the homelessness issue, of course, that is definitely pressing in North Park and in Chris Ward's district, but the entire city. Even in southeastern San Diego, we have a problem growing now. But I think the difference will be the mayor may have to move towards the housing first, as you were referencing, to get there.
Okay, we're going to take a break right there. If you're on the radio, you can get us on podcast and listen to the rest of the show. If for those of you on podcast, stay tuned. This has been The Voice of San Diego in partnership with News Radio 600 Kogo.
The following is a sponsored message from American Medical Response. Voice of San Diego is a nonprofit, and a majority of our budget comes from listeners and readers like you. But we also depend on revenue from grants and advertisers to maintain independence and produce more of the hard-hitting journalism you expect from us. When accidents, injuries, or emergencies happen, American Medical Response is there. American Medical Response has been caring for patients in San Diego County for over 65 years. As an exclusive 911 emergency medical response provider within the community, AMR wants to remind you to stay safe, San Diego. To learn more about AMR, visit amr.net.
We are back. We were talking about the future of the mayor, whether he was a lame duck or not. But at the heart of that conversation, of course, is that the impossible actually happened. We don't usually see incumbents fall who are on the San Diego City Council. The last one, too, was 26 years ago. But two have fallen this time around Tuesday night. Let's start first with District 4. As of Thursday afternoon, Monica Montgomery led Council President Myrtle Cole 56% to 44%. Just an absolute drubbing. Montgomery marched into the Democratic Party Tuesday night. This is the party they had at the Hotel Republic. It was a a lot of noise, and she said this.
And we did this without labor, without the party. This was all, the people's party, all community, all people. And it's going to change how we do politics in San Diego.
So, as she says in there, without labor, without the Democratic Party, labor not only didn't support her, went after her pretty hard. Dwayne, you've run in that district. You know that district. What happened?
You know, first of all, Myrtle Cole was not a very effective representative for the community. But more importantly, the community had enough. The community is tired of being told or dictated to as if they're a colony of labor, the Democratic Party, who they're going to vote for, when they're going to vote for them, what they can run for. And that wasn't the direction the community wanted to go. They wanted to go a different direction. They demonstrated that in the primary. Monica came in first place. And there was a lot of backroom shenanigans that went on to try to convince the community they wanted somebody that they clearly didn't want. And enough was enough. And so a lot of folks stood up for that.
I want to follow up on two things you said. Colony, go into that a little bit more. What did you mean when the community feels like it's treated as a colony by labor?
It's very much so that this outside entity that is governing over us from afar, and those are the rules we're going to live by. And even if we agree on a lot of the issues, which we do, that was no longer good. It was a revolution, if we want to use those terminologies. And that kind of aspect is, no, we understand what's happening in our neighborhood. We know what we need in our neighborhood. We know who we want to lead us, and we're going to do that. And they did.
When you talk about the services and the action in the community, you know, she can list some things she got done, libraries or whatever. Is it a longer list, or is it some kind of? I've been trying to articulate this for a while. Some kind of relationship that people feel like they have with the representative, like that representative is somebody they know and have a rapport with, and that she failed in that aspect.
That's an interesting way to put it, because like her response is, you say I haven't been delivering the goods for the district, but I did this and this and this. And I think it's like, that's an example of like, once you're making that list, you've already probably demonstrated that you've lost the district, because people don't think in terms of like, oh, but that one project has taken place. It's a feeling
like
of
a rapport.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that Myrtle, I can't recall right now if it was KPBS or iNewsSource, they did the study on the council members in their time in the district, and she was near the bottom, second to Scott Sherman. And I think Scott Sherman's made it pretty clear he doesn't like the job. And so Myrtle was not from the community. She was not in the community. And again, the folks in the community are sophisticated and smart. None of the projects that Myrtle listed, Myrtle started. They were in the works, whether it was the Jacobs or the former Council President Tony Young. Those were nothing that she did. She promised a gas lamp east. Never seen that. She promised a grocery store. We haven't seen that. She didn't deliver at all, and she was invisible. That was the knockout from the start.
Can I ask a question? So, Dwayne, do you think it's interesting because Monica was not beholden to anybody or anything besides the community in this, right? Like, not the labor unions, not like special interests or the Democrat machine, if you will. And one of the things I love about Tony Young was that he was always willing to work with everybody, or at least hear like both sides out, because he had support kind of from both sides too. Do you think that Monica will be more like Tony Young, or do you think she's going to be a little bit more radically progressive?
I think Monica's going to be Monica, and that's definitely a little more progressive than Tony Young was, but she's super smart. And I'm excited that the council's going to have an attorney again on the council, and she's going to bring that to the table. But you're absolutely right. She's beholden to the community and not the labor or the party. There's a lot of agreement on those issues, but she's not going to be bossed, and she's going to be thoughtful. And I think she'll be open to talking to all sides and hearing all sides. So that'll be progress.
It is a weird thing that she ran into being kind of edged out by both the party and labor, because she's just unquestionably two Myrtles left on every major issue. There's like the one thing you could say that she is that is not the case is that she supports election reform at San Diego Unified to move to district elections with term limits, which is not something that the teachers union supports. But on the major issues that people in the district care about, she is to the left of those. It's weird to me in a Democrat on Democrat primary that the party and the labor union would side with the person to the right.
I think that it wasn't to me. I think that the politician I think is most parallel to her right now is Shirley Weber, who obviously is, a very eloquent spokesperson on a lot of major issues in criminal justice reform and on school accountability issues. And so she has this, what you would call left of some people's approach on criminal justice reform. But then on the schools, she's to the right. And I think Monica doesn't just say it needs to change because of governance issues or process. She says, I can't look at people and the status of our schools in this district and say that the way things run is the way it should be running. And I think that's why she's gonna have this interesting angle, I think, of appealing to some folks on the right. And you have to remember, she also worked for Kevin Faulconer. I mean, remember there was all these mailers saying she worked for a city hall Republican,
a top city hall
Republican,
a top city hall
for what, 2 weeks, maybe 2 weeks.
Yeah. Dwayne, you mentioned that Monica won the primary. That didn't become clear until several days after the vote counts. In this one, it was really decisive. The same two candidates, and Monica ended up winning by a lot more without any of that support. Were you surprised by the margin in the race?
No, I really wasn't. I've shared that I've done a lot of campaigns over the years from the state, local, and I have never felt such palpable emotion, organic organization in the community ever, except for Obama. And I'm literally serious about that. Wow. You go anywhere. Wow. I went to the bank. Someone's like, where's Monica's campaign office? I'm at Starbucks. Do you know Monica's phone number? Whether it was my old Little League coach who's 85 or the millennial who were outraged about the racial profiling comments, no one wasn't talking about it, and they were talking about Monica Montgomery. And I think that was just really organic and really powerful.
Yeah, Dwayne, we were chatting when you came in. I was saying that every time I talked to somebody from District 4, they conclusively said, playing pundit, they said, Monica's going to win. It's not going to be close. We're not voting for Myrtle again. And I talked to somebody from City Hall or from the Democratic Party, and they would say, incumbents never lose. We've got this turnout machine. Here's how they're getting outspent. And, the people in the district seemed to have a better sense of what was going on.
And I think, Andy, in that regard, after the primary, and in the Voice of San Diego, Myrtle's comment was, I didn't campaign, and even labor didn't see it coming. She leaned into the establishment.
Yeah.
Monica leaned into the community. And the thing that also wasn't surprising was 60% of the voters in the primary said no to Myrtle Cole.
Yep.
So it was an uphill battle. It may not have been obvious downtown, but it was very obvious in the community.
One of the things that I reflect on now is when you did the profile of the race after the primary, Andy, and the first thing you said that she did after that she sort of triumphantly said she did, was meet with labor to figure out what to do. It was
Myrtle, that was...
It was her first instinct was to call them and say, what do we do? As opposed to I don't know, go and just... was it salvageable at that point, or is the point you're making that no, and that is also revealing of what her instincts were to turn toward the establishment to people who might be able to buoy her through that?
Yeah, her instincts are wrong. And as Ashley mentioned earlier, she was put into office by labor. And Monica was born in the community, has been in the community. Myrtle was drawn into the community and then propped up by outside dollars. She never had a connection. And again, her presence in the community was non-existent. So it was too late. It was too late.
Well, so that change didn't have a change in the makeup of the city council as far as partisanship, but it was an incumbent that fell. But one other race did, and that was the race in District 2. Jen Campbell, who, by all accounts, she'd been active in the community as far as activism and such for, Democratic Party clubs and stuff, but hadn't been a major person, I think, in discussions about the future leadership of the city. But she has emerged, and now she is going to take this seat by, it looks like 13 points. It's a significant win. And that does change the majority on the city council to a 6-3 majority. They can pursue a progressive agenda without worrying about the mayor's veto at all. We asked them, I think, I kept talking to people like, what's the agenda? And why haven't you talked about like what you would actually do with that supermajority? And they kind of were honest that like, well, why would we reveal that? Right?
Yeah, I got criticized. I mentioned it on the podcast last week, and somebody was like, "Why would we tell you that?" I was like, well, I feel like we deserve to know. I don't know.
But it's also like kind of an indictment because it's like if voters were voting on those things, maybe they would be more reluctant to like vote for the supermajority.
Like, so, yeah, telling me that it would be dumb strategically to say what you might do. It's not that reassuring.
It's an acknowledgement that it might not be that popular. Yeah. So we tried to banter around some ideas of what that could be. Rent control, obviously that's going to be a little harder now. Some sort of increased requirements of affordable housing, maybe some sort of tax on transportation or whatever.
The one specific thing Tom Lemon from Building Trades mentioned was a possibility that if the city on private projects, this is not city-initiated projects, private development projects, if the city grants a density bonus or a waiver, some of these things that the city does to make development a little bit more easy. He said if they do that, they should maybe force those private developers to pay prevailing wages. So that would certainly be something that I could imagine the mayor having an issue with, that maybe their veto-proof majority helps them on.
So, Ashley, I guess, one of the things I was excited to have you on because we often have these, squishy, like never Trumpers on or whatever, people on the right of center of the political spectrum, but aren't necessarily, fans of Donald Trump and such. But Donald Trump really did factor into this District 2 race. On the right, the Lincoln Club was making the point that Lorie Zapf has stood up to Trump, especially on offshore drilling. And then the Democrats really worked overtime, and Labor really worked overtime to tie Lorie Zapf to the Trump administration and all the things that are controversial in some ways. What could she have done? Should she have embraced Trump more and just tried to ride a MAGA wave, or should she have done a better job denouncing that? How do you think Republicans in that sort of situation should handle that?
That district was +4 Democrat before 4 years ago, and now today it was +10, I believe. So it's the demographics of that district has changed so much. Lorie, there was no real conversation in this city council seat about what the policy was. Like for Lorie, she tried to talk about, I do stuff with, I love Clean San Diego, the San Diego River Foundation. I believe in responsible development. She's actually one of the Republicans who supported height limits, right, for a building. And on the other side, you have people who are saying Trump, Trump, Trump. I mean, they practically said in one of the mailers, Lorie is going to build that wall with her own 2 hands with Donald Trump at her side. It was so ridiculous. And I did a fundraiser for Lorie. There was 40 Democrats who came out from PB, very supportive of Lorie, very supportive of the work she had been doing. Unfortunately, we still don't know who Jen Campbell is. We still don't know what their plans are. We still don't know what policies she stands for, other than the fact that the machine helped her buy this seat and tear apart a good person.
And I think, Ashley, your numbers, your reflection on the numbers of Democrats, it's almost an inevitability. Lorie probably couldn't have done nothing. And I don't even know if it even required the outside money from Labor or anyone else to do this. It was a blue wave.
There's not a blue. You have a Democrat incumbent who lost. You have a Republican incumbent who got reelected, Chris Cate. And you had Lorie Zapf lose. So I don't necessarily call that a blue wave, but what I will say is in your district, in District 4, you had the opportunity to talk about the community. Sure. Okay? There wasn't all the extra noise that was happening. In Lorie's district, it was all about Trump. And Lorie was saying, okay, let's talk about San Diego. And we are doing the city of San Diego a huge disservice by not talking about the policies that matter to the constituents. And if that was a conversation that happened with Jen and Lorie, I think and the community believed that was what they wanted, then by all means she should represent that district. But that was a conversation that never happened, and that's a disservice to our city.
And I don't disagree with you that the conversation was not had on the issues. And I think it goes back to this never Trumper and the Trumpist, or whatever you want to call them. And I think Mark Cafferty on Twitter yesterday said the president's unhinged press conference. And I think the president was right. You can't run the middle. You can't, those that didn't embrace him lost. And Lorie was trying to thread the needle, and that was not going to work. And so I think it was about Trump and not about the community, which is unfortunate. But I just think the dynamics were just far too strong. And of course, Chris Case District, the second most Republican in the city, right?
Well, yeah, no. So similarly, so I asked Jen Campbell, I said, well, what do you make of the fact that this race has become dominated by these national issues? This is a nationalized race at the city council level. And furthermore, we had them both here for an hour and talked to them. And on the major issues in that district, they're pretty similar. They have the same type of opinion on short-term vacation rentals, height limits for development, the
Midway Community Plan,
the Bay Park Community Plan, all these things. So there wasn't that much distance between them. But in any case, what Jen Campbell said to me was, well, I just don't think that that's the right way to look at it. Like, she's out of step with the district. It's important to people here that somebody not be supportive of the president, that, you're suggesting that there's something wrong about that because it's national and not local. But if people don't feel like they want their representative to be in step with that person, then it's a perfectly fine thing for them to vote on. And I talked to one of my friends who's a ardent Donald Trump fan who lives in that district, and he read my story and started supporting Lorie. He hadn't followed the race. It was important to him that she did support the president. So to Dwayne's point, is it possible to dissociate yourself? Like, even if you want to do it, is it possible to suggest that you don't live in the same political environment that we are in nationally?
Let me just add to that real quick, because I think what's interesting about that district as well, and I live there, is that you don't have this was the first election after Donald Trump got elected, and it did cause a lot of angst among that sort of coastal liberal identity, and this was the first election to have something to say about that after 2016. And so, like, what outlet did they have? Like, Scott Peters? No. They could go volunteer on a campaign. The Nathan Fletcher, Bonnie DeMantis race, Fletcher, killed it there. And then there's this. And so it's almost like they just want a chance to weigh in and almost relish that chance. What's your reaction?
I think Republicans should learn a very important lesson from this election. And I'm actually going to point to Brian Mainshine's seat. Brian Mainshine was a committee chairperson under Speaker Perez. He has always been known for working across the aisles. Republicans call him squishy or a rhino for all of his legislation. And he was targeted. And it was not about, what
Same
Brian...
with Rocky Chavez as well.
Yeah, exactly. It was not what Brian does, as a legislator. It was about, his party alignment. Same with Rocky. Mm-hmm. Same with Lorie Zapf. It was not about what they were doing for their communities. It was about, what party registration there was. And even with Bonnie to some extent, in that race, it was everything that was out was oh, you don't want a Trump person. She's denounced Trump. She doesn't like him. She's, if you looked at her background, you would think she was a Democrat in a lot of ways. But it was gloves off.
So let me ask you to elaborate, though. So what you're saying is, what lesson should Republicans take from that? To not compromise because it's not worth it?
I think don't take it for granted.
Don't take it for granted that what your compromises achieved would actually translate to better will at the institutional politics level.
Yeah, I look back at everything. Lorie really valued the relationship we had with Barbara Bree. And she really valued the relationship she had with Todd Gloria. And those two campaigned their butts off against her.
Yeah. I thought about that today because I was like, look,
her and Todd used to really be buddies on the council.
Yeah. No,
that was something she was very proud of.
Yeah.
I tried to think about the best allies that Lorie had on the council, and she had a rough relationship with Scott Sherman. Mm-hmm. I don't know, Kersey doesn't do anything to sort of align or network around as far as, political power goes. And so then I was like, well, actually, I think her best friend on the council is probably Barbara Bree. And you're right, Barbara Bree relentlessly
went after her.
Yeah, so
and took in, and Barbara is the founder of Run Women Run, and she's about empowering women to run for office. And then you have Lorie, who worked with her on offshore drilling, and she maligned her routinely over and over. It was awful.
But
it was
I mean,
awful.
isn't this politics? Like, different parties, you get a chance to pick up a seat, you spend the money to do it. I mean,
but I
don't know, would Republicans have done it differently?
But don't Democrats always say, like, we should work together and build the community? And it's like, okay, you have a Republican who's willing to work with you, and it doesn't mean you shouldn't want that seat, because of course Labor wants that seat. They wanted to have that veto, power. They wanted to be able to push forth this super progressive agenda. But I think for Barbara to take it to that level was pretty shameful.
Well, I think the stakes were definitely higher in District 2. It was a supermajority. When you allude to Brian Mainshine, I actually would differ. I think folks were pretty nice to Brian Mainshine and held back a little bit because of his compromise.
Yeah, we saw Tony Atkins decline to, go in against him because of the relationship there.
Yeah, that's true.
Over $1 million was dumped in that last week against him.
I talked to somebody who said that they got more mail from that race than they have ever, and she's a politically active person, than they have ever gotten in any race.
It's sneaked by because there was not much political coverage.
Right.
Or news coverage, I should say. Yeah.
Right. So, well, I want to press you one last sort of, what is the route for Republicans right now? Like Harkey did embrace Trump. Trump's son Eric came here. There was a lot of she didn't do anything that could be seen as sort of distancing herself from Trump. That didn't really pay off. But then Lorie Zapf did not denounce him, but also didn't embrace him.
Chris Kate had. I mean, here's the thing. If the Democrats had run the same campaign against Chris Kate that they ran against Lorie, I don't know that it would have worked, because Chris Kate's on the record 2 years ago, saying, I do not support Donald Trump. This is wrong.
Yeah. So then I guess I ask you, Ashley, what is the route? What is the future of people who care about fiscal conservative policies? They might be coastal, Republicans on the environment, something like that. They're probably, control immigration, but respect immigration. There's, that sort of California Republican, the Schwarzeneggers, or what is the route for them if they don't like what the president's doing, but also don't want to join the network of, don't want to pull a Nathan Fletcher and go all the way to the Democratic side of things. They want to be independent still of that. What is the route for them? Is there a route? Do they have to choose MAGA or nothing?
I think in that congressional seat, you'll find somebody who's going to be pro-Trump. I think that makes a lot of sense for that particular congressional seat. I think that
Gaspar or something.
Yes. I also think that infrastructure, voter registration is going to be important. I think that what you see too with Republican, we actually have a pretty organic movement, whereas on the flip side, it's a lot of like the machine and the unions and so forth. So I think Republicans have a little bit of a disadvantage. And then also having a majority, 6-3 council is going to really put a spotlight on the rift that you're going to see within the party. Like there's going to be a rift. We've already seen it with Monica and Myrtle. We've already seen it with the labor unions, with Nathan, Lorena, and Mickey Kasparian and everything else. So it's going to be really interesting. And then you have on election night, Democrat Party Chair Jessica Hayes calling Republicans inhumane and Nazis. So that type of language does not necessarily help them attract more voters. And I think that it will help Republicans in the long run when we look towards the future.
What would you make if there was somebody like Brian Mainshine who was looking at a more ambitious future in politics, and he says like, okay, I can keep going with the Republican Party. What would you say to him if say like don't? And he's thinking, well, I want to just go to like a right of center Democratic run. Like if we're gonna have a Democratic community, like I could be, somebody not like I don't know, Dwayne. Is that okay? Like somebody business friendly. Democrat. What would you say like the Republican Party can still offer those folks?
Well, I think we have strong values. I don't think that there's this whole thing like, Republicans are so evil or Republicans are bad or don't like. We have a great mayor who, wants to serve the community. Lorie Zapf, she worked really hard on environmental issues. I would mention Mark Kersey infrastructure. There's this whole notion of this idea, and it's take a step back and look at what we're doing in San Diego and look at how we're trying to work together. I think Kristen's a great county supervisor. What she's doing with mental health and veterans and homelessness are all really important. I think Republicans continuing to get our message out of what we are instead of being labeled, unfairly labeled in a lot of ways. Yeah, there's going to be some bad apples that don't help, but that falls on both sides.
I'd like to believe that the Democratic Party values and progressive values and the labor values are better, and I believe in all those things. But I'm not a math person, but it's math. The demographics of San Diego have changed both in terms of party registration, but more importantly in terms of ethnic diversity and the cultural diversity. And I don't think any Republican, Kevin Faulconer, Brian Mainshine, there's no future for any of the Republicans in this city
so I want to
or in this state.
So diversity makes it unable for Republicans to get elected?
When you're talking about building walls and you're talking about shithole countries, yeah, you're not appealing to the people who live in San Diego County.
When you have a mayor who supports DACA and says we need to have infrastructure at the border so that we can have better business, and who's made such an effort to build business and commerce with Mexico, I really think that's an unfair statement.
No, I would say actually that was probably another issue that the mayor and the council can work on, some of those binational issues. I agree, absolutely.
So now you want to work with us, but we shouldn't be elected.
No, Kevin Faulconer is not that Republican Party.
Okay, wait a minute. He is the Republican Party. He's the future of the Republican Party in California. Absolutely. And I think that's you're seeing the leadership of Kevin.
Governor this year. There's no path forward for Republicans.
You can read his mind.
Well, I think it's a fair question. I mean, so if what Kevin Faulconer stipulated has a different approach on some of these issues that Dwayne's talking about that have alienated Republicans with minority groups. Kevin Faulconer is not like Donald Trump on those topics on immigration. You say he supports DACA. He's made overtures with the Chamber of Commerce about how important the binational economy is. No question. The question is not whether that can be appealing to Democrats, which clearly it has. In his reelection, he wiped the floor with 2 Democrats. Obviously, based on the demographics of the voter registration totals in the city, a lot of Democrats were voting for Kevin Faulconer in 2016. There's no question about that. Would that happen in 2020 if he was able to run again? Would he be able to continue to work the way he's working right now in the future, now that Donald Trump has become the figurehead of the Republican Party and changed the Republican Party? I mean, I don't think there's any question. The Republican Party is different now than it was when Mitt Romney was the most powerful Republican in the country. And so in that new world, is there a place for Kevin Faulconer?
Yeah, absolutely.
No question.
But what about if you broaden it out and you look at what happened to Chad Mays? I mean, he wasn't chased out by Democrats. He was chased out by other Republicans in his party for working with Jerry Brown.
Or was it a personal relationship that was inappropriate with alleged?
Well, they say it was. And if you look at Rocky Chavez, that was certainly for working with Jerry Brown. And so you say that Democrats don't want to work with them, but it's the Republicans who chase them out. Darrell Issa endorsed Diane Harkey over Rocky Chavez. So you say that the Kevin Faulconers are the future of that party, but the people who act like Kevin Faulconer, Rocky Chavez, and Chad Mays and those types have kind of been eaten alive by the Republicans.
I think Kevin has done a very good job of prioritizing business and doing things. There's a difference between being a Rocky Chavez or Chad Mays and some of your policies where there may be a little bit more left. And then also being like the mayor where you're being a little bit more thoughtful and trying to embody some of the fiscally conservative ideals without having to compromise some of your values. And I think that's actually really important to think about, because you're not talking about, I'm going to act like a Democrat but carry the Republican banner. You're saying I'm a Republican. I still have fiscal conservative views, but there's a way we can approach this differently.
I mean, is there any doubt, though, that if Faulconer somehow popped on to Donald Trump's radar, that Donald Trump would do what he did to Mia Love or whatever yesterday? Kevin Faulconer is not a Donald Trump type guy, and what I guess I fear is that the Republican Party is literally going through a purge of people like him now, as Trump sort of like calls each one of them out and says, I don't care necessarily about your policies. Like, you didn't embrace me enough. And I guess I don't see how you both talked about that the Democrats not maybe evolving to support Faulconer. What I'm worried about is the Republicans.
I'm actually really interested in hearing this. When you say Kevin Faulconer is the future of the Republican Party in California, I think that was an uncontroversial to the point of obvious thing to say in 2016. I do have questions about whether it's still true. It seems like you are confident that it still is true. I'm just interested in hearing more about why the events of the last 2 years haven't made you less confident in that.
Well, first of all, going back, looking at what Kevin has done in the city when he was reelected, he was elected overwhelmingly, I believe, in District 4 and District 2.
He did have a pocket in Canto that was very strong.
Yes. Very strong. And I think he appeals to a lot of folks. He has great relationship with public safety. I think that's a huge issue. So I think that despite the fact that, there have been some setbacks for the mayor, there's no denying that. But the fact that he's able to move forward, I think that there's a lot of opportunity for him.
So to be clear, I don't mean the events of the last 2 years having anything to do with him. I'm not suggesting that his star has fallen because of failing to get the convention center on the ballot or the hepatitis A crisis or anything like that. I mean what's happened above his head at the national level, that the path of the Republican Party has changed, potentially veering off course from where he was.
And I know the Mayor Faulconer never endorsed Trump.
No, I know. That's what I mean. That's what I wonder is the problem, is whether it's possible to be out of step with the president and the future of the Republican Party in California.
Depends on what role, I would guess. I think that the mayor would have to lean on his legacy and the inroads that he's developed. I don't see the Republican Party as, like, in California as a failing movement. Mm-hmm. I think there are a lot of folks who are probably more fearful to come forward because of how they're treated by the open community, left, progressive, when you're told by Maxine Waters, like, confront them, attack them and so forth. It's hard to be a Republican in California. It is hard. Voter registration in San Diego has changed, but I think holding on to Young Kim's seat in Orange County and Mimi Walters holding on to her seat, there's definitely a lot of positives that you can see as well. Elizabeth Heng didn't come that far off from taking the seat in Central California. I think there just needs to be the state party, I think, can have some changes in terms of, like, its infrastructure. I think voter registration, that change needs to be addressed locally within the Republican Party here. Looking at the difference in District 2 is an example of that, but it's not hopeless. Because, when you're talking about jobs, you're talking about improving the economy, you're talking about getting people back to work, you're talking about, the Democrats always talk about, housing crisis, but you won't let us build anything. Let us build something. Let's go into our communities and do revitalization efforts, and let's update our plans and stop the bureaucracy, cut it, because that's what people want. Look at education. That's going to be huge.
I do think that education and home building is going to be a major cleaves on the left.
I would add that I think not building homes is a bipartisan issue in California. Yeah. I don't know that either Republicans or Democrats like building houses in this state.
Not in my backyard.
Yeah. Let's talk about another race. We actually haven't spent a lot of time on it the last couple of weeks because it kind of petered out, but I think it's significant now that it's over too. Nathan Fletcher looks like he may get something like 68% of the vote. I can't picture the Republicans having put up a better candidate for this. I mean, former DA, we once called her the most powerful politician in San Diego, Bonnie DeManis.
Is there anybody that's been elected, any Republican has been elected more times in San Diego than Bonnie?
I don't know.
Ron Roberts, maybe?
maybe
Duncan
Ron
Hunter
Roberts, Bill Horn
for a while. That's Ron Roberts, Bill. And so and yet, after the primary, it seemed clear like that just died. That whole race. She could have made a lot of statements. She could have done a lot of events. She could have done a lot of things, and it just didn't show up. And now Nathan Fletcher is back. He has a chance. He needed to win this, or it would have been really hard to picture him coming back with a political career. Now he has a chance. What is his trajectory now? The Republicans are saying come on, don't be naive. He's going to run for mayor. He insists that he won't. Who wants to start this? Dwayne, he did really well. It seems like there's only a couple precincts he may have lost in the entire district. What do you think happened with his race?
Well, again, I think it's a national dynamic. Nathan Fletcher's a very attractive candidate, and I know a lot of folks have a dispassion for him. I find him to be a really nice guy, actually, and from my personal interactions. But again, the benefits of the 4th supervisorial district was a Democratic district. It's become more Democratic over the years. And again, similarly to Lorie and Mayor Faulkner being a lame duck or not, is the environment is not right. I think Nathan Fletcher was right on the issues. He's with the folks, the issues that people are within the community. But again, just the dynamics. I mean, that's the future.
D4 in registration was just running into a Mack truck for any Republican.
Absolutely.
Basically.
Do you think that's true? Do you think Bonnie DeManis could have won this race?
I think if we had better funding, there would have been a better opportunity. Going back to his trajectory, I would love to know what his trajectory and his plan is going to be. But since he's blocked me now on Twitter, I'm not really privy to that information. But those of us who have known him for a long time know the type of person he is. And he's a power-seeking individual who wants to be president of the United States.
You used to work with him, right?
Yeah. And I've known him for a very long time. Remember, he made the comment when he left the party. He said, "I have not changed on one policy issue. I just changed my party." So, think about that. You say, he wants to do all these things for the community. Well, we all know he's a pathological liar. That's just a fact.
The passion against Nathan, I have never quite understood. I know that the party changing is, we'll call it odd.
Is that a lie, or is that just people change their priorities? They change their policies. What are you? Where does that come from? What do you feel when you and some of your colleagues, react so hostily to him?
He's lied. He lied and he lied and he lied. And he only changed parties and he only changed positions when it was politically convenient for him. He left behind his, beautiful, amazing, powerful Republican wife and 2 children to then conveniently marry one of the most powerful Democratic women in California. And it's not a secret that Lorena is also power grabbing, and she's used this as an opportunity to really push and help buy that seat for Nathan. Look at the numbers. There was $2.5 million, over $2.5 million spent in the primary for Nathan. There was unprecedented amount of money. For the first time ever in her history, she put in $900,000 into the Democrat Party. That's significant.
You talked about you hope Kevin Faulconer is the future of the party, and you expressed a desire that you hope Kristen Gaspar runs for Congress and that she's an up-and-coming candidate. How is that kind of trajectory different? That, like, when it's Lorena and Nathan, it's power-grabbing and power-hungry and desperate for power, and when it's like Kevin and Kristen, they're just like the future and they should run for these higher offices. Aren't they just all politicians seeking to move up?
I think me saying that I would like to see Kristen in a congressional race is very different than Nathan being a state assemblyman. We all worked with him. We knew what he wanted. He made it very clear that he had a political mission, and he lied. He changed parties. He's lied on his positions. He's lied on his past. It's very clear what he's trying to do. And that route is very different than the mayor's run for office. He has not said he's finishing out his term. Nathan says, I'm going to do 8 years. Do we really think he's going to do 8 years? At least on the county supervisor? Come on.
I think similarly, I really don't want to miss across the nation, more women, more people of color, LGBT candidates. That is the future. Again, I like Nathan Fletcher. I think he's going to be a damn good supervisor. But that's probably where he's going to be for the next 8 years. I don't know that in 2020.
He'll leave sooner to run for something else.
No, in 2020, what is there? There's mayor. In 2020, I'm not even sure that other white male Democrats or others will do very well in that election.
Okay, I'm going to push on this a little bit. I'm interested in this. So I went to the Republicans, a lot of Republican associated groups were at the U.S. Grant for election night. I went there, and I knew a lot of people there, and it was a lot of white folks like me. It was a lot of white guys and everything. And then I went to the Democratic Party, and I was like, this is amazing how different it is. And it was there were a lot more people of color, and there was a lot livelier in a way. And I guess what you're kind of hinting at is that there is no future for a straight white guy in the Democratic movement. Is that true? Is that what you're saying?
I think the country and, yes, society is moving in that direction. And it's not that it's the wrong thing. I think it's the right thing to do. And I think in this situation, I mean, again, I'm a Democrat, but our San Diego County Democratic Party, Jessica Hayes, is an absolute embarrassment. You're correct.
Why?
She's not very bright. And, I mean, there's a lot of folks who are very concerned about how the Democratic Party in that primary didn't even interview the black candidates running for supervisor in that race. Didn't even interview. There's some folks who would argue that, in fact, it was said that we've tried diversity. And so no one rallied behind Amar in the primary, and they certainly didn't do anything for him in the runoff. So there's going to be another Democratic candidate, Central Committee chair soon. And you think they're going to be a person of color, and they're going to be progressive, and it's going to be different. And so, yes.
You signed a letter to Labor and Democratic Party leaders, that part of which said, we will remember what you've done to Monica Montgomery. And then you brought up this thing about not interviewing the black candidates for supervisor, the seat that Nathan has now won. What does remembering look like?
Well, I actually would argue in my brief analysis of the post-election that I don't think Labor came into the 4th District and did GOTV. Monica Montgomery was the only non-Labor endorsed candidate that actually won on election day. The ground machine that Labor has worked in District 2. It even worked for Tommy Huff in District 6. It worked for Antonio Martinez in District 8. I did think they stand down, actually. And at the end of the day, the people in the 4th District, Southeastern San Diego, and in, I would say, the South Bay, District 8, are aligned ideologically with Labor and the party. But the party and Labor need to get aligned with the community's priorities. And if that happens, it'll be okay.
Why does Labor have to get in line with the community priorities? Their responsibility is to represent their members.
I think very much so on the issues such as business and economic development. Southeastern San Diego is craving economic development. That's another area where I think Monica is going to be very forceful and very strong in demanding that happen and may be able to work across the aisle on some of those issues. But at the end of the day, the minimum wage increase is right. But if you don't have a job, period, the minimum wage is not that important to you. What are we doing for reentering felons, for folks with backgrounds? What are we doing if there's not even a small business to get a job? Those are some concerns and the reality of folks in urban communities. And so we're for the minimum wage, we're for prevailing wage, we're for that. But at the end of the day, what's putting food on my family's table? And those aren't speaking to those issues.
This is a fascinating conversation. I got one last round. We do have 3, it looks like, Democrats who are lining up to run for mayor. Barbara Bree, Todd Gloria, Assemblyman Todd Gloria, and Congressman Scott Peters, and Barbara Bree's on the city council.
Potentially others, who knows?
Potentially others. Chris Cate, the Republican city council member, made it clear to us this week that he is not running for mayor. So that means
really caught me off guard when he told me that, by the way.
Well, he came up to me after PolitiFest and he said, you didn't ask me whether I was specifically going to run for mayor or not. And I would have told you. And I was like, oh, I thought that was the whole conceit, that I wouldn't actually ask everybody, but assume you were, and so that's what his answer would have been, I guess. Huh?
Unless something changed, I don't know. But yeah, he said it as unequivocally as one could say it. That's what he told me.
So, Dwayne, let me ask you that. So, among those, Scott Peters is a straight white guy, middle-aged or older, and then we have two, a woman and a person of color. Are you kind of saying like Scott Peters need not apply?
I'm actually saying that there may be somebody that's not even on the table right now.
Yeah,
that will emerge. I mean, we've seen this again across the country with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Folks are coming out of the woodworks. The Andrew Gillum, he didn't win in Florida. He wasn't the choice, but he rose up. So I'm not sure if it's any of them. I like all of them. I'm not sure if it's any of them.
Yeah. And Ashley, so if you're starting to put together fundraising for a prospective Republican candidate, what would you look for? What would you tell them would be the way to pull this off? Is it possible for a Republican to win the mayor's seat in San Diego? That seems like a crazy question given San Diego's history, but really seems interesting now.
It is a crazy question to ask when we have a Republican mayor.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It seems...
I don't think it's impossible. Again, I think there has to be a lot of work to be done in terms of voter registration and outreach and messaging and so forth. Nothing's impossible. A couple of people on the Republican side is Mark Kersey. He's been very non-offensive, but according to Dwayne, he's straight white male, so maybe he doesn't have a future.
I think you meant in the Democratic Party, right?
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, it'll make up our party.
Hopefully, straight white males have a future, because I got something going in there.
Scott Sherman has been kind of poking at it.
Really?
Evidently, which would be super interesting.
I thought he didn't like being a politician.
He's going to have to wipe away that tally he's
Countdown.
got for how many
Right?
days he's got left in office.
And I would love for Scott to do it for pure entertainment factor. And then there's, talk about Shelley Zimmerman, perhaps.
That's what I was just going to ask.
She's an independent, though, right?
And I think that would be a huge problem for her, because one of the benefits, a huge detriment to the city council and the mayor, are the contribution limits. So most people don't realize it's $1,000 a pop when you're running for mayor. It has to be personal dollars. So it's always really funny to me when you see this council person is bought by business because they donated. They literally donated $1,000 of probably a $500,000 campaign. No one's really bought here. And so you have member communications, which, going back to Nathan's race, how Lorena was able to put the almost $1 million into the member communications fund. That's how you're able to talk to Republican or Democrat voters. If you don't have a party, how are you going to talk to some of those voters, and how are you going to raise enough money in order to be successful? So that's her biggest disadvantage, in my opinion.
Easily solved with a trip to the DMV, though, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So
Chris Cade is probably the smartest man in San Diego. Maybe at PolitiFest before the election, it was possible. You don't have to look very much further. It's there is no future for Republicans in San Diego, and the state of California. It's already happened.
I don't think he's writing off our party. I think he's taking into account the fact that he has a brand new baby girl.
Beautiful
and
baby girl.
And so I think his priorities have changed a little bit, and I don't think that he would write off the party. He's probably one of the most active, community-oriented people. We would be grateful to have him as mayor.
I'm not saying he's not Republican. I'm saying he's smart, and he sees the handwriting on the wall.
So let me ask to close out, there's a few physics of San Diego politics right now that I find fascinating. One of them is this sort of protectionism that's arising in coastal neighborhoods, vacation rentals, anti-growth, community plan outrage, stuff like that. Scooters. I think it all fits into don't stop with what you're doing. You can identify as a very passionate liberal and yet be against vacation rentals, against all these things. And then I think there's a bubbling sort of school reform concern. The Monica Montgomerys, the Shirley Webbers from the south of 8, but you also have people on the right of center who have been making cases like that for a long time. There's also, concern about just abject poverty that seems to be, and the cost of living that seems to be a rallying point both for the right and for people on the left, Alliance San Diego, many of these other entities that are hey, people, there's a quarter or more of our population that are are one step away from homelessness, and that the cost of living is way too high. What other forces of San Diego politics do you guys see that are going to define some of these discussions going forward that maybe got revealed by this race? Is it as simple as vacation rentals, or are we talking about bigger phenomena that we have to watch out for? The quality of life and the cost of living seems like a giant one. Dwayne?
I think that's the analysis that I've been trying to make, is that Labor, Democratic Party, Republican Party, business, we're now in an environment, in a culture where, like folks like to say, the resistance, there are a lot of very organized folks, people at the ground level who don't need that. The Labor's not the only game in town anymore. People can organize themselves, whether it's the women's movement or the Women's March or Me Too or Black Lives Matter. The days of, I think, either side having a special interest that's going to drive the day is over. People have stood up for themselves, and they're not going to go back.
What about criminal justice reform? How big of a deal was that in the D4 race? That's what kicked off Monica Montgomery's campaign, but I don't think it's what defined it. But is that going to be a major force going forward, or just kind of a thing that's always, in the background of these discussions?
Criminal justice reform is definitely important, and Myrtle Cole also put the nail in her coffin when she made the not so wise and wrong statements about racial profiling. Folks didn't forget that. That was being talked about right before the election, still to this day. Now, her lack of community connection and involvement was important, but that was a death knell. Genevieve Jones-Wright won the 4th District. She was all about criminal justice reform. So that's an important issue that's going to be addressed, I still think, moving forward by both Republicans and Democrats, I hope.
Ashley, there are two issues that Republicans in California have always turned to: taxes and crime, and criminal justice efforts and law enforcement efforts. Do you think those are going to be major forces going forward? I was kind of surprised with the results, for instance, of Prop 6 and things like that. So what do you think?
Definitely top issues. A big difference between this past election and also what you'll see in 2020 is just turnout in general. So there's not really Republicans aren't like, oh, John Cox, he's going to save the state. Like, I appreciate that he ran. I think he brought forth good discussion, raised some important points, but that's not going to turn Republicans out to vote ultimately. So I think you will see just a natural increase when it's a presidential year, and those, the homeless crisis, crime, public safety, and taxes being most important.
There was a lot made, at least in the 4th District, about Myrtle Cole being a former police officer, which is a generous description of her past in law enforcement. And I think that didn't really work. That didn't really pan out. That didn't play very well. And I think we go back to this national context. It's kind of ironic that Trump has us all scared about MS-13 coming across the border. And I didn't know what MS-13 was before he was president. But we have the lowest crime rate of the big cities, and we're right on the border. So I don't think that law enforcement, tough law and order thing is going to be the thing that moves forward in the future. I do think it's the economics, the bread and butter issues, what's on my plate.
I mean, we have the lowest crime rate because we had a great district attorney and a great sheriff, and that speaks volumes to what they've accomplished in our communities. But to think that people who live in neighborhoods don't want safe neighborhoods or safe streets or safe schools, I wouldn't toss that aside.
All right. Well, great discussion. I'm very glad you both came in. Ashley Hayek from Golden State Consultants, thank you for coming in. And Dwayne Crenshaw from Rise San Diego. Hope you'll consider it again. And on behalf of everybody at Voice San Diego, if you're around in Barrio Logan and would like to come to our Brews and News event at Iron Fist Brewery, please do. It'll be a lot of fun. That'll be the 14th, a week from, I guess it's Wednesday now. So Wednesday at 5:30, come on in, and hopefully we'll have some people to talk to, and it'll be a lot of fun. So consider that. And for all our partners, News Radio 600 Kogo, thank you for helping.